This is Needy and Normal. Welcome. I'm your host, Ashley Levering, mom, wife, and life coach. After years of coaching and learning from my own life, one thing is clear. Meeting your needs is essential for living your best life. Here, we'll talk about your needs and not only learn to accept them, but also tend to them without guilt. Let's get needy because it's normal. There's such a huge misconception about venting. Venting is about release and letting things out of your head that are all-consuming, or letting things out of your head that allow you to solve a problem. The power of a vent session is so real, and it's for everyone and anyone. And here's the difference. You're not just venting to talk shit. A lot of times we're venting because we need to just get negative energy and negative thoughts out of our mind, and we need somewhere that we trust to put them. And sometimes when we vent about other people or things outside of us, it makes the vent session seem safer. But a real, true vent session is between two people who trust each other, a listener who cares, and someone who needs to say things out loud. There is so much value to that relationship and that process and the ability to be both of those people, because we all need those moments to let it out and vent and release some energy and negative thoughts or positive thoughts. It takes two people and sometimes more to have a vent session, and it doesn't have to be judged. It doesn't have to feel guilty. I know there's those moments where someone, and this has happened to me in my friendships, where they'll talk, for a while on the phone or in person, and then at the end of the vent session, we'll say, "Oh my gosh, I haven't even asked you about you. I'm so sorry." And then boom, there's guilt. So here's the responsibility of the listener. Not that it's up to you to take the guilt away from the person who's venting, but you have this powerful seat where you are open, and it's a privilege for someone to tell you things. And even though it's their turn to vent in that moment, that is fairly clear, that becomes established pretty quickly. Even though that's obvious, and you might get to the end of the vent session and they may say those words, "I'm so sorry, I haven't even asked you about you. What's going on with you?" You have the power to have a turn. If they're that person for you, you may take a turn, but maybe it's not then. And that does take a bit of strength. But you also have the ability to say, "Hey, it's okay. This was yours. This is your turn." And that's a mutual respect. And that establishes that the relationship is still balanced even when it's not your turn. And that's okay. And then they can feel, the person venting can feel, "Oh, okay, I feel better." And also there's a responsibility put on them to come back to you one day and make sure that they get to show up for you as well. You have to be in the headspace for it. And you have to have the capacity for it. And so there is a mutual respect. Sometimes there's an emergency vent session. You can imagine this. The best friend calls and says, "Oh my gosh, I have to tell you about this thing." And the other person on the other line, or maybe they're in person, it's just not a great time. And what do? Right? We panic. We think, "Oh my gosh, I want to show up for this person, but I'm so busy right now. My headspace is in my own world and I have my own things to work on." And so we don't want to not be tender with this privilege of someone saying, "You're my person right now. You're the person I'm coming to with something I have to share." And if you think about the first person you would call when you need to vent, or even if it's great news, if it's the first person you call for dumping the bad stuff and sharing the good stuff, that person is really special to you. And it's important for the person who's receiving, whichever way it goes, to be available for that moment, and no judgment, no guilt on both ends. There's no need to feel bad about being the person who needs to vent. There's no need for the person who's listening to judge. There is so much trust in that sacred vent moment. If for some reason you are in your own stuff, it could be any kind of stuff. You could be going into a meeting. You could be on the other line. You might have your own problems and negative thoughts swimming around in your head. Whatever the case is, if you're not at capacity to receive a vent session for someone, it's okay. And it's okay to use some boundaries in the nicest, kindest way. I have a good friend, who we go back and forth and share things with each other. We're each one of each other's safe place. And everyone needs to have a safe place or safe person. Someone that when there's great news or bad news, they're your person, right? Everybody needs that person. And sometimes that's not always available. And I'm going to touch on that. But there's this thing that my friend and I do where if we're not at capacity to handle each other's stuff in that moment and we've got our own things going on, we will put a pin in it per se, and we use the words table of contents. Okay, I don't have a lot of time right now. I'm about to go into a meeting, but give me the table of contents and then I will call you back later. I want to hear everything. So in those moments, you're saying, I care. I want to know what's going on, but I got to be honest, there's something else going on for me and I won't be able to give you my undivided attention, and I care enough to want to be able to do that for you. And what is table of contents, right? Here's the gist of what I need to tell you when we have a chance to really talk it through. So maybe it's 2 or 3 things, or maybe it's just one thing, whether it's that negative thought dump or a positive share, whatever the case is. Then there is a mutual respect for you guys in continuing the conversation another time. Now, circling back to having that person, that safe place. And maybe you're blessed with more than one. And maybe you have a circle of those trusted friends where you can decide which one would be the person to talk to about whatever the news is that you need to share. I know I've done that when it's super close to my heart kind of things. Might be different if I have a problem to solve. You know, I would go to someone who's really well equipped or ready to go with solutions for me. And sometimes you just need that person to listen. So there could be a different outlet in that safe person. You could have multiple people that you get to think about when you have things to share and when you need a vent session. And if it's hard to find that person, if that doesn't feel clear to you, first of all, that's okay. This is really where the spark came in for my wanting to do this episode, was for those who don't have that one person or haven't tested out the people in their lives with trusting them with inside thoughts or problems to solve, and you're still trying to figure out so many things on your own, and the overthinking has become the vent session, right? Because that's an internal vent session. When you're dwelling on something or concerned about something, excited about something, a decision, whatever it may be, if it's all internal and it's all in your mind, you're going to turn it into an overthinking, overwhelming process. And this is where having a support person to let it out, right? A vent, release it, is so important. And honestly, incredibly helpful, and it can speed up this process of whatever you're working on. So whether that's a family member, a friend, a teacher, a mentor, someone at work, if none of those seem available to you, this is where coaching can come in. This is where therapy can come in. And this really sparked for me because I've had several clients who've come to me and they may have really wonderful, loving people in their lives, but there's just something that doesn't get them to that place where they're comfortable or ready to choose one of those people in their lives as their safe person to come to and be vulnerable. And so coming to a coach, sometimes it's a discovery of, oh, I didn't realize this vent session that I get to have with a coach. A lot of people think a coach will
automatically help you problem solve, guide you. And yes, that's part of it. But there's the part that I love so much, that I hold so dear, and that matters so much, which is the holding space. It's called holding space, right? You probably heard this term before. In coaching, we hold space. And oftentimes, I'm that one person for a client. I become that trusted outlet. I'm outside of the family and friend circle, and it feels safer and it feels easier to trust it. And hopefully listening to me on the podcast, you kind of get that vibe from me. But usually after a session or two, or even just the initial consultation, people feel this genuine trust in me and they're able to let go. And so I've had two different situations. One where I've had clients come to me and they will let it all out, right? There's a big vent session. I'm holding space. And one of two things happens. One, they get, actually three. One, they get frustrated with themselves and they think, oh my gosh, all I've been doing is bitching the whole time. And I have to remind them, listen, sometimes you got to let it all out to move on to the next phase, which is then when you're able to process and when you're able to make clear decisions. Of course, as a coach, I can help you through that. And the other thing that happens is you solve your own problems. You say things out loud and you realize, wow, I just needed to hear myself say that. Wow, I had no idea I thought that or felt that way. I've kind of mentioned this before, but this is the beauty of holding space. You get to hear yourself think out loud, so nothing's stuck inside, and then you actually can move forward. And I always tell this to my clients, listen, if it's got to come out to help you move forward, we're going to talk about it. If it comes out and it holds you back into the past, we're going to have to get past that, because coaching is about moving you forward, right? And the last thing that happens, that is one of the most beautiful things, and I do not take it lightly, is that I often, like I said, am the person that they finally let all those inside thoughts out too. And I become their safe place, and I become that person. I become that vulnerable place that they feel comfortable speaking to. And in that holding space part of the session, they finally feel something that they've maybe never felt before, which is cared about and heard and listened to and understood. And that is so magical for me to be able to serve that to the person on the other line or across the table, however we're speaking. It is so magical, and I hold it very near and dear. And at the end of a session like that, there could have been a lot of emotions. And the vent, right? The vent session, me holding space, becomes the release that they need and the block in the way to finally move forward. And it's beautiful. And I love being that person. I cherish it. I am careful with that privilege, and it's really important. So if you don't have a family member, a best friend, somebody that you trust, that you can feel comfortable speaking up to and telling, your issues to, or the negative thoughts or the problems you're trying to solve, if you don't have that one person, try coaching, try therapy. It's more beneficial than sometimes I got to give it a try to see how it feels. And while coaching's not therapy, to be able to get things out of your mind and out in the open to be able to work with, it is therapeutic and it feels really good. And you're allowed to have that, because remember, your needs matter because you matter. So don't forget the value of a vent session and the privilege that you receive and can give also. If you are that trusted person, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing to be able to show up for someone in that way, and also to have someone show up for you in that way too. So take this, be good to yourself, and I'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Needy and Normal podcast. If you liked this episode, share it generously. I would so appreciate it if you would take a quick moment to leave me a review and click that subscribe button so you won't miss an episode.
For information about coaching together, visit ablifecoaching.com.